This is episode 697 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. This episode's going to be a little different from the typical. There's been a lot going on, of course, at the state level economically, as well as the federal level. And we're going to discuss a few items relating to the governor signing bills to start with. And then we're going to have you can call it a deep dive. And I think that's safe to say about an issue that is not directly a state level issue, but I think it's been the most impactful kind of test of economic literacy among Americans that we've seen in a very, very long time. Rarely has an economic policy been imposed so quickly or will be imposed so quickly if it indeed comes to pass. And it's something that we're going to spend some time discussing here with the balance of the show. But right now, we are going to focus on the fact that Michelle Lujan Grisham, governor, has until Friday to sign or veto the bills that passed this session. She has signed a few additional bills as of the latest signing that she did on Monday, and I want to go through a few of those. And some of these are bills that we cared about. Some of these are bills that are going to impact our world, but we weren't rating in our Freedom Index. And, we're going to just discuss briefly some of these concepts. So, Wally, the first one, and one that will impact everybody, is SB 16, the creation of semi-open primaries in the state. So, as I understand it, now you will be able to show up on election day or early voting and take a ballot for the primary, of course, for the party that you want to identify with at any given time. That time, not
they pronouns.
Yes. I'm trans voter.
Yeah, I'm feeling Democrat today.
Well, and there are states with slightly more open primaries, but this is a pretty open primary. It's been kind of a long-term shift over the last decade and a half, but this is definitely part of a broader philosophical shift where we've seen a move towards a more open primaries in New Mexico, away from closed primaries. Any thoughts on that, Wally?
Well, my thought on that is it goes back to my youth in Silver City, where the number of registered Democrats was almost 100%, and they were that so that they could vote in the primary, because that's a lot of times where the Democrat votes were, and the Republican primaries usually didn't have any competition, although some Republicans could win in the general sometimes. I also think, then, I'll say this quietly, I think this may be a tool that makes the most radical progressives less electable from the Democratic Party, because you might get some Republicans that go ahead and say, well, I'm going to go independent and do what I can in the primary again, because not that we don't have primary competition for legislators, particularly in New Mexico, but it's certainly rare. And not to say that on the Democratic side or on the Republican side, always all of the candidates are good candidates and any one of them would be better than the Democrat. That's not what I'm saying, but that's a more likely scenario in my mind than the other way around. And so, Paul, I think I've been registered Republican for a long time, but now, do you need to be registered as an independent to get this choice?
Yes.
Let me just say, things that make me go, So I would consider it for one.
Yeah, the impact is hard to discern. The Rio Grande Foundation did not take a position on this legislation. I think there are pluses and minuses that, quite frankly, we're just not going to go into at this point. But Obviously, Republicans in New Mexico are very much an afterthought in terms of the party structure at this point. They are the second, but by quite a margin, the second major party of New Mexico. And uh, yeah, it could hurt. It could help Republicans. We don't know, and it is very much philosophically kind of where the Democratic Party is these days. So, one might question sometimes if the Democrats act on principle as opposed to party interest on some of these issues. I do believe that this is overwhelmingly a principled position of largely the Democratic Party. Of course, they control the legislature. So, uh, moving on, Wally, I know you're a big fan of this one. The SB 219 to make New Mexico one of the first states in the nation to create a medical psilocybic mushroom, aka magic mushroom,
The magic mushrooms.
under the care of a health, health provider. So a very broad
A
ability.
psychological doula, as it will, to help
Yes.
your brain be born through this. So, wow. So, other states have done this, and other states have actually gone more of the recreational magic mushrooms and have started to cut back on that because guess what, Paul? It's not all roses. There are this is not just free love and expanding your mind without some downsides. So we'll see. I don't know if you've got bad, very bad. What do they call that?
PTSD.
Or well, organic mental illness.
Oh, okay.
Could this help? I've read things that indicate that it might, but is this going to be like the medical marijuana law where it's like come here and I'll give you a certificate to get your mushrooms? That I don't know.
Yeah, I think it could be very much of that because of the broadness of the medical providers. But the governor signed the bill, and we'll just wait and see. Again, this is a bill that the Rio Grande Foundation did not take a position on in its Freedom Index, just beyond the scope of what we work on. HB 71 increases by doubling the annual distribution from New Mexico's Early Childhood Education Fund, goes from 250 million to 500 million annually. Uh, this, we're not fans of the entire uh, proposition of early childhood. This one was rated negatively in our Freedom Index. Uh, Obviously, once that bill hits a fund like that, we are, we understand, and that's the great important understanding about our permanent funds is that they are simply deferred spending. They have already been spent in all practical senses of the word. It's just a matter of when they hit the consumer, so to speak, when they hit the market. And this is just increasing spending from a fund to do something that we think has limited value, which is early childhood learn education, quote unquote. But
Yeah, and deferred government spending, not spending
just
that is
debts,
going
yes.
to be returned to us, the taxpayers, to be able to do anything about it.
Yes, another bill we didn't like, HB 586. We talked to Troy Clark of the New Mexico Hospital Association about this a little bit, but this one creates new oversight from the Health Care Authority Secretary appointed by the governor over acquisitions and mergers of hospitals in New Mexico, and whether they're going to theoretically have a negative impact. And I just have real trepidation about putting a government official in charge of basic market moves like we want to sell our business. Oh, wait, we got to have the secretary weigh in on this particular issue. And of course, they're going to be politically motivated in a wide variety of ways. I think it's got the potential to actually tamp down investments in New Mexico's healthcare system, which is the last thing we need.
Yeah, Paul, and bills like this sometimes are meant to, quote, prevent the bad actors from owning our hospitals. but it also could slow down a struggling hospital to the point where it would look at bankruptcy as a alternative to being able to be sold to someone else. So yeah, so is this this bill? If you read it and you've just taken your magic mushrooms, you're like, this is all good stuff, man. But if you look at the reality of where these things have gone over time, it's like, will this be a net positive or a net negative? It's going to depend on the situation out there. And believe me, again, as you say, you have a speaker about hospitals. Healthcare is in a world of hurt in New Mexico right now. So we'll probably get to see some impact from this bill in the not too distant future.
All right, so moving a little more quickly, SB 37. Again, these are bills the governor signed, creates a strategic water reserve fund. SB 33 creates a wildfire preparedness program, technical assistance and grants for fire mitigation. SB 41 creates turquoise alerts for missing members of Native tribes. Senate Bill 57 exempts some abortion related records from release under the New Mexico's open records law. And SB 535 establishes funds for a 988 suicide crisis hotline. So those, by and large, were bills that we did not have a position on one way or the other that don't really affect RGF or our vote rating system. But those are some of the bills that the governor signed. She has till Friday, like I said earlier, and there are a number of important pieces of legislation that she will either have the opportunity to sign, pocket veto, not, no, well, she could pocket veto the pocket veto bill, because isn't there a bill that would ban the pocket veto, which would be
Yes.
the ultimate of ironies? But
Yeah.
I think she still has the opportunity to pocket veto or line item veto, which I suspect there may be some pocket veto worthy items in HB 14, which is kind of the latest version of the tax bill. But a lot still on the table for the governor with her signing session up on Friday. So, any last thoughts on
No,
that?
just these were not necessarily the big heavy lift ones that are likely to be very controversial. I think that's coming later.
Yes, some of those bills, obviously, things that we were not particular fans of. But moving on, and we're going to talk for the rest of the show, by and large, about tariffs. Now, Wally, I think it's safe to say that you and I broadly are free market conservatives, maybe more even towards the libertarian side of things, broadly speaking. So we have a healthy skepticism of government and government policies, but we want to go through what is a tariff and explain a little bit about what's going on, and then offer some New Mexico specific insights and kind of maybe a quasi debate, or at least a discussion of some of the issues and our personal viewpoints on these things. So let's let's start with the basics. Tariffs are a tax. They are a tax placed on items that are brought into this country from foreign countries. I assume
Yes.
you concur with that. That's a
100% agreement. And they are a tax, meaning the money goes to the government.
exactly
It doesn't go to private citizens or businesses, it goes to the government. And so it's a
right.
tax.
Now there are some questions and debates, both politically. There was a bill brought forth and voted on in the U.S. Senate where I believe a narrow majority, with a small number of Republicans joined by Democrats, interestingly enough, uh, passed a bill that doesn't have the teeth or the legs to get over a presidential veto, but it would have put Congress in control over decisions made surrounding tariffs and increasing the rates of tariffs. I believe that any profound economic decision like that rightly belongs in the traditional sphere with regard to that Congress should have the ability to pass or increase or decrease taxes and tariffs. This, of course, the Trump plan is being done under some kind of national emergency order that, whoever wrote this, whenever this came into being as a law, I think the understanding, the expectation was if the United States is under attack for whatever reason, we will suspend these free trade agreements and enact different economic policies. And so those could be overturned. But give me your take on the role of Congress here as opposed to Trump doing this on his own.
Yeah, so I've read the Constitution,
Ooh,
and
you're the one.
get him. So Congress has the authority to levy taxes, including tariffs. That's their responsibility. And like so many things, Congress has abdicated its responsibility over the years to the president. It's passed laws allowing the president to impose tariffs for national security reasons unilaterally. And this is some of those provisions is what Trump
Right.
is using to do this. And so it's interesting that they this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for about 70 years. The reduction of power in the legislative branch and the concentration in the executive or the president. And so I do find it interesting that Congress is like, well, maybe we ought to have something to say about that. Yeah, you did until you gave that away over the years.
Yeah. And, obviously, we can criticize Congress for abdicating its power and authority. We can, uh, question whether this qualifies as a true national emergency. And I think there will be decisions brought before the various courts, probably ending in the U.S. Supreme Court, that will have a final impact here. But that's certainly part of the debate. And I will say that when it comes to profoundly impactful economic policies, it's not just a process issue, although that's critically important. I would say that the credibility of American markets and trade policy, and finally with the stock market, is important here because even with a profoundly stupid policy that, like Obamacare, to take one example, Obamacare was not declared out of whole cloth by the president. It involved the Congress and months of negotiations and votes and action. And if you saw the writing on the wall and you were a shareholder in X, Y, and Z corporation, you could buy or sell your stock holdings uh, in plenty of time to account for that policy. We certainly President Trump did engage in a lot of hyperbole and talk about tariffs and how it's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. That's a direct quote, and other things around tariff policy. But supposedly, these policies, these tariffs, are going to take hold tomorrow. We're recording this on April 8th, so we're talking April 9th that they take effect. For them to be imposed so quickly and so profoundly, impactfully, I think it does hinder kind of the sanguinity, if you will, of people investing in the American stock market. Because if the president of one party or the other can make a decision that has such massive impacts on your bottom line, on your portfolio one day, and then we're seeing some backtracking within the stock market the next day because there's deals being struck and this, that, and the other. I think it's a real question for investors, and I think it's going to take some time and hopefully some legislation in terms of restoring Congress's authority on tariffs for this kind of uh, this policy should not be done like boom with the stroke of a pen. That's my point for the actual investors as well.
Yeah, and so I don't disagree. It's like a mighty bold move, to put it bluntly. And
Bold
then,
move, Cotton.
yes, and then is this move going to be one that he can, the president can get what he wants and get back to a better solution quickly without, without doing permanent damage? We will, both economically and politically, we will have to see. But, there are countries, and it almost goes back to World War II, Paul, and the Bretton Woods Accord, where it's like, okay, you're part of the club, and as long as you won't do anything nice to Russia, the US will give you broad latitude to do whatever the hell you want. And on tariffs, that kind of has been happening. There's a lot of tariffs that have crept in that are not reciprocal in any way. And again, it didn't happen over time. It happened over a 70-year period, a lot of this stuff does. And then to try to undo it or even go the other way in one day, it reminds me of thinking about dieting my own in particular. It's kind of like, if you've gained weight over a several year period, basically not eating for a month is probably a tough way to go in terms of getting back to where you want to go. But uh, and there's a lot of these tariffs make no difference of any kind at all. There's not all tariffs are created equally. The one that's my personal favorite is the Japanese have like 1,000% tariff on imported rice, because, Paul, Japanese people that I've talked to, their attachment to their rice makes New Mexicans' attachment to red and green chili seem inconsequential. So it's almost a cultural tariff. Rice is our food, and we don't want anybody else's coming in. But when you look at car parts, a lot of other things going back and forth, places like Germany, what their tariffs are on importing cars into Germany relative to what our tariffs are with German cars coming in the United States. Is there a room for a little bit of adjustment? Absolutely, there is. But the way we're going about it, it almost boggles my mind. It's like, yeah, where is this all going to end, and how do you undo this? Both negotiating better deals and getting back to some equilibrium without throwing the world into a worldwide recession or potentially depression.
Yeah. So we're gonna just kind of. It's hard to discuss this in a simple, coherent way because ultimately there's a lot of different points and counterpoints, and so I'm just gonna
Yeah,
throw some things out and
please.
we'll kind of discuss them. So, uh, one of the things I think you and I would agree with is that uh, yes, we would like to see lower tariffs all over the globe. And if Trump is moving towards a zero tariff policy, then that gets certainly a different perspective from us than these tariffs are here to stay and they're going to be used to build American manufacturing in ways that we haven't seen in recent years. Now, he was quoted as saying, no, it's not, when asked if Europe went to a zero tariff situation, that he would drop the tariffs. Now, that's problematic. And we've heard both sides of the equation from the president and his, kind of point people on this issue. Do you agree with me in terms of we we could at least salvage this situation by going to very dramatically reduced or zero tariffs by and large? I throw out China. China's a unique case, but Canada, Mexico, EU, Australia, Japan, Vietnam, the islands with the penguins, etc.
Yeah, and so yeah, I do think that's the case. And then Trump said that that's not the case. He is a negotiator. He says things he takes positions that are very hard line until he doesn't. Now, he may mean it. He may love tariffs. He may uh he may have Smoot Hawley figurines on his mantelpiece. The last time that a huge tariff regime was put in the United States, which
Which
caused.
caused the Great Depression,
Yeah.
or at least contributed to the length of the Great
Yeah,
Depression.
did
And
not help.
yes,
So yeah, so I so what is the end game here? Man, I really don't know. And and I'm not saying he knows. I mean, he's kind of he's stirring the pot to see where opportunities might come, or maybe he does have a good example of what he wants to have happen. But should Germany have a much higher import tariff on Chevrolets than we have on BMWs? I think that's a bit of a stretch.
well, let's talk about the way these tariffs are being formulated and administered, and we'll talk about whether right or wrong, or
Yeah.
whether good policy can be discussed relating to varying tariff rates. Now, first and foremost, the big charts that Trump used when he rolled this out, I believe it was Wednesday afternoon after the markets closed, and that's when we got the big shakeup decline on Thursday and Friday. Those charts were based on not tariff rates, but on a calculation of the so-called trade deficit between our country and the other country,
Yeah.
and that we were imposing a rate that was related to that, somewhere generally speaking on the order of uh, half of the amount was then the rate we were imposing. Now, calculating real tariff burdens is a difficult thing because, as with every country around the globe, in the United States is no exception. We do have traditionally have had relatively low tariffs, at least for the last several decades. There are specific industries in those countries that have successfully lobbied for protection. I believe Canadian dairy is a prominent one that's become kind of a cause celeb in this
Right.
whole debate. So just because other countries impose tariffs doesn't mean it's like the old line, well, your friend Johnny jumped off a bridge. Does that mean you should go jump off a bridge, right? The ultimate harm of the tariffs that they impose, while yes, it does infringe upon American exporters, say if they tariff Chevys but not BMWs, it is unfair. But is it does that it follow that the United States should charge higher tariffs on other countries because with the assumption that we're going to keep those in place as long as they keep their policy in place? I would say that no, the reason the United States is wealthier and more prosperous is because we do have lower tariffs. We should engage in deal making to lower those rates in those other countries, but slapping tariffs that are as high or higher on those countries only harms Americans in the end.
Well, and Paul, I was thinking a lot about this. It is suboptimal or inefficient for the United States to have total trade balance with any particular country. Some we should have surpluses, some we should have, because there's the whole idea of competitive advantage. And
Right?
some countries, frankly, have nothing that we want, and we'll never want anything that they have. And so we probably run a deficit with them where they may have.
Or surplus with them.
Well, we
Because
are we
if they don't have anything we want, then we're going to run the surplus.
yeah. So there's that. So it's this elaborate system. It's one of those that reminds me of my linear math nodal optimization. So that is one of the issues that's really big.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, all tariffs, you know, lowering of tariffs broadly is probably a good thing. Now, you said China's different, and China is different. And so one of the issues is that what happens when a government subsidizes an industry or allows dumping of product below cost from one country to another? Those a lot of those other
Real
things.
quickly on that,
Yeah,
dumping can only be done, generally speaking, with the support of the government and subsidies, because dumping involves creating a product and then selling the
the
traditional
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 definition.
definition is,
Yes.
yeah, you are say you're building a car and it's a Chinese automobile, and you are through whatever kind of policies that you're enacting. Maybe the car costs $15,000 to make, but you're selling it to the United States for $10,000. No business is going to do that. But in China, a lot of the businesses are owned and controlled by government. They have strategic processes that work contra to market forces. So what we're ultimately doing, and I think there's room on both sides of this debate, but what we are, American consumers, if they buy one of those vehicles, they're essentially having $5,000 of the cost paid for by people in China,
Yes. Yeah.
which we can argue whether this is good or bad from an American perspective. From a Chinese perspective, I think it's inevitably bad, but go ahead and
Well,
take your point.
and some of the dumping, although not all, there's different reasons. So, and back to Bretton Woods, which is the dollar denominated
Right.
system across the world. Some countries, the cheapest way they have to get dollars is to sell products below cost to a country that will accept them. Now, the other thing is you hear sometimes, and again, people say things that to them this is what it looks like. Where it's like, oh, that country is just dumping its product below cost. Sometimes their costs are lower, and that's back to the advantages of trade. And then, and again, I am not bringing any simplifying thoughts to this process, Paul. I totally understand. The other thing is strategic goods, and so let me just use one that we've talked a lot about healthcare this year in
Mhm.
New Mexico because it's a big problem here. A big percentage of our drugs are made in China, and so
Right.
you get in this trade war, unfriendliness, real war, whatever. There are certain products that you may not be able to get for a long, long period of time that could cause dramatic problems to your country. Same,
So let me jump in again
yeah,
on that.
no,
Now,
and
I would agree with you that there are potentially dumping generally is covered in trade agreements, that there are anti-dumping provisions if a country is so-called dumping their products on the market, that there are repercussions for that. Now, uh, you know, so do you need to go into this full-fledged trade war to address dumping? I don't think so. I think there are proper mechanisms for that in even with China. Now, in terms of strategic businesses and industries, and I would include microchips as one that we get from
yeah.
Taiwan. Now, if you had a strategic approach and said, okay, we're going to levy tariffs on China, but Vietnam and Taiwan and Thailand and Korea, etc., all of those countries, Japan, we're going to exempt completely from tariffs because we think China's a strategic threat and these other countries are not. Uh, that would be I would feel very differently about that process. I'm not saying I would necessarily be, leading the cheer for it, but I would not be as concerned. Do you feel, based on your understanding of the way these tariffs have been put forth, that that is the way things are going?
Well, that's not the way they started.
Okay,
Is that how they will end? I don't know. But and you know what? China and Vietnam are good examples.
right.
Vietnam, and in no disrespect to Vietnam, they have nothing that's strategic to us within reason.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Yes,
and they may have a mineral or whatever. China has a lot that is strategic to the United States, I think.
rare
Eh,
earth
Rare
minerals,
earths, drugs, they
pharmaceuticals. Let's go with
yeah,
pharmaceuticals.
well, yeah, pharmaceuticals. Yeah, not opium from the 17 and 1800s. They also are in a position to do strategic damage with the little issue that is Taiwan. So
True.
I think Taiwan, vis-a-vis China, is hugely strategic for the U.S. Because you know, we used to think that microchips were, oh, these are niceties, but boy, we saw during COVID, you just slowed the supply a little bit, and the disruption that causes in a modern market. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, what happens with Vietnam, which by the way produces a lot of clothing, shoes, things like that. If you look in your tags, Vietnam does a lot of those. But
Yep.
by the way, those are easily moved from country to country, whereas supply of strategic minerals or advanced chip making, like in Taiwan, certainly not as easy, and it could be decades
So
to
give me
get the
your
ability.
kind
Yeah.
of elevator pitch on China. So uh, obviously, a bit of a geopolitical rival. We don't particularly care for their human rights record, the way they govern themselves, whether the WTO and the entire openness going back to Richard Nixon in China is all, I think, open to question and has been for several years now. But that's not what Trump did. Trump didn't just go at China. Do you?
No, he
But
went. He went.
your hope, if I'm translating this,
Yeah.
is that that is the way things will wind up, is that China may self-isolate while other countries hop on board with a more free trade zero tariff regime.
Yeah, and then the one that I think that there's some room for is we do have our 51st state to the north that we need to address, Canada and Mexico. Those are major trading partners,
Right.
by the way. So yeah, though if you can come to terms with them quicker instead of slower, that would be very helpful. And then the other one,
Well, hold on to that. That one's you opened a big can of worms
okay,
there.
sorry about that.
I'm for eliminating tariffs specifically on Canada, probably generally speaking on Mexico as well. I think uh, not NAFTA, not MCA, but I think
Yeah.
those are our closest allies, and we should have a North American free trade zone. I realize that Mexico has lower wage rates, et cetera. The 51st state rhetoric with Canada has been incredibly harmful. We need to,
Yeah,
uh,
Canadians, the nicest people in the world now, cuss Americans under their breath.
yes,
So
and plus there's a presidential, prime ministerial election going on in Canada. It would be very nice to have Polyev, a much more conservative figure, in there as opposed to a more Justin Trudeau esque leftist individual in there. Uh, I think Trump's claims about fentanyl certainly don't make any sense on the Canadian border, nor do the illegal immigration claims. Mexico may be a different story, but I still think, broadly speaking, we can do a lot more with Mexico in terms of the honey of working with them rather than slapping them with a bunch of tariffs, especially kind of a uh, sudden deviation from previous efforts. And that would also, and we're going to talk briefly about New Mexico in just a couple
yeah,
minutes, but that would also help New Mexico because of our large border commerce with Mexico.
yeah, and then again, we get back to what are the tariffs on? So if Canada has tariffs that don't apply to the U.S., who cares? But they really are have some very strong protectionist policies on their food supply.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do they consider that strategic? They probably do, because I don't know. The last I checked, Canada's not a good place to grow anything. You know what I mean? It's cold. It's
Well, wheat, they get a lot of wheat up
oh
there.
yeah. Well, the easiest crop in the world to grow, they can grow, but beyond that, not a whole
Right.
lot. So yeah, they can do dairy that can eat their wheat, but there are a few things like that that now, why is that so important in the U.S.? Politically, we have the ability to produce more food than we need.
Right.
So sometimes things that they just fall into a line where both sides think they're right, and so I don't know what to do about Canada, but it's interesting that I believe that energy has been left out of the mix.
Yes, energy has been left out of the
And
mix,
Canada and energy flows between the U.S. and Canada quite freely and quite easily, and is very important to both.
which is ironic, of course, the Keystone XL pipeline being one of the big things that Biden did that Trump disagreed with, and we disagreed with canceling of that pipeline.
Right.
And I don't know, obviously energy being exempt is nice, but it kind of raises a red flag to me about the seriousness of the approach.
Yeah. So and I agree with you. But yeah, if you're a Canadian, I'd have well, Canada is not Canada's like the U.S. They've broken into conservatives and liberals up there as well, and so the liberals in Canada, they just want to live. They don't want energy. They don't need it. You know what I mean? They like to do everything they can to hinder it. Whereas, particularly in some of the Western provinces, that is their industry. It's a lot of the Western provinces, they're a little like New Mexico. If you take away their energy, their oil and gas, there's not a whole lot left to be done. And so I think part of Canada might be really upset that we closed the Keystone pipeline. So yeah, is there some hangover from that? And again, I think there is with part of Canadians. But
All right.
that's why this thing is so hard, and I. That's why you are the host, Paul. You need to be able to put a neat wrap around this to
Well,
allow us to
we're
think
gonna
about
get yeah. Well, I guess we got to get to that point. Unfortunately, as much as I could talk about this stuff, and there's still more to explain because yes, it is highly complicated. I Trump said they're screwing us on trade when he was talking about the EU. Uh, I disagree with him. I don't believe that trade deficits are a harmful thing to have. You and I have trade deficits with our respective grocery stores, whoever that may be for you. For us, it's Walmart. Uh, but that doesn't inflict harm upon us and my family, nor does the trade deficit that New Mexico possibly has with Colorado or Texas and vice versa with other states. Uh, the United States itself is a 50-state free trade zone. The founding fathers, one of the most beautiful aspects, and one of the ways that the Constitution truly has held is that they prohibit policies being implemented in one state or another state that infringe upon free trade within those 50 states. Now, there are certainly some policies that have kind of snuck their way in, but by and large, the United States remains a 50-state free trade bloc, and that is one of the beauties of this country as just an institution. It's 50 diverse states with different policies, but ultimately, we are all trading freely with each other.
Yes, and Paul, notwithstanding the fact that there are states that have huge surpluses, and there are states that have huge deficits with regard to trade with each other. And guess what? I can't even tell you what those are because we don't even care about that
Right.
for the reason you talked about.
And if we want to, if we are concerned about uh, jobs and economic development, perhaps I would recommend you listen to the other 697 or so, 696 episodes of this show, because what we've said by and large over those episodes is smaller government, lower tax rates, fewer regulations as a general rule, obviously some basic regulations, but those can apply to the state level and the national level. So if the idea is to make the United States more competitive on a global stage economically, we're already a very competitive country, but we're not going to be more competitive with tariffs. We'll actually be less competitive. We'll be more competitive if we get our entitlement programs under control. We cut government spending at the federal level. We reduce, deregulate, pro energy policies, a lot of the things that Trump does want to do. Final point here impacting New Mexico specifically. Uh, these are regressive taxes. It is worth noting that tariffs are charged at a specific rate across the board. That means they're regressive. That means that they will impact lower income New Mexicans and lower people in New Mexico at a greater rate than they will many other states because, by definition, they are regressive. Wealthier people have more money to invest and whatnot. New Mexico is also not a major manufacturing state. So, to the extent that we reshore some of these manufacturing jobs, if indeed that is what Trump plans to do, New Mexico will by and large not be one of the states that benefits from that. So we will see more negatives and fewer positives from tariffs than other states. And of course, the exemption on energy does specifically, it probably ultimately helps New Mexico. Although the real issue for us, because we have so much energy, is if China, if Japan, if some of these other countries, as this potential trade war gets going, decide they want a tariff American energy, that could be a real issue for New Mexico. So, just a few thoughts on that. Unfortunately, well, I don't think this conversation's done. I think we're going to have many more opportunities to share our views about tariffs and the nuance. I will note that crude oil prices have dropped fairly dramatically from closer to $70 down to close to $60. That is something to keep an eye on as well, just for New Mexico financial and economic point of view. But we're going to leave this for now, and I'm sure we'll chat more about it down the road. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.